Welcome to this new video tutorial where I'm going to show you how we can store our required data in a database and then use that information for our QA automation test. So here I'll be demonstrating on example of storing the application URL and site name in the database. We'll then retrieve those URLs from the database and open them one by one in any browser using Selenium. So we can also utilize this concept to design a data-driven automation framework where we can store XPath, actions, or other necessary information in the database and use that information to automate our test. So let's begin. First, I will be creating one Python file, and then I'll give this name as DB automation, as we are using the database here. Firstly, in order to connect with the database, first we need to define the database configuration here. So we'll be using MySQL connector, and we'll be using the following parameters to establish the connection. So first we have to import the MySQL connector. So import MySQL.connector. So this will be the MySQL connector will be used to connect with the MySQL database. And first, to define the configuration here, so we'll be using MySQL equals, so MySQL .connect, and this will connect us with the database. And here we are going to define the configuration. First we'll set the host name here. So as we are using our local machine as the database server, we'll use localhost here. Okay, so localhost. So you can add any database server name if necessary. And now we'll be defining the user from which we are going to connect with the database. So I have created one user called sign_vision to connect with the database. But if you haven't created any user, then you can also use root as a user here. And then along with the user, we have to also supply the password here. So for that, I have also set the password for this test @12345 as a database DB password. And I have also created one database. So name is QA automation. So if you haven't created any database to store the table or other information, then you can create that. Create the one so using any MySQL queries executor. This is the basic configuration that we'll be using for connecting with the database. So now so we have defined the host here, and then user, and then password, and then database. So this is the basic configuration that we need to connect with the database. And now after establishing this connection, first now we will be writing two functions. One to write the content in the database or table, since we haven't created any table previously. So okay, for that let's define one function called write db. So this is the function name I'm going to write here. And first we'll be using the the configuration we have set here. This is the MySQL configuration, or we can also set that this is a MyDB, so this doesn't confuse with the MySQL or MyDB. So first we need to use the cursor object. So cursor object help us to connect with the database and use any query or execute any query on that database. So for that I'll be using the myCursor. So we'll be using the this MyDB configuration, and then .cursor is the object we are going to use. Okay, this will establish the cursor object. Now first we can write the create query here. So to create the table, we can write the query here. So for creating the table, we'll have the syntax like create table, and then the table name. I will give the table name is site info, and then we'll store the site name, any website name, and then their site name. And then for this we can use the varchar as a variable character as the data type, and then the length I can define the 255 here, and the another column we'll have is URL, where we'll store the URL, and then you can also set this as a paragraph. It won't be case sensitive, but and again for these two, let's define the 255 as the length, and then yeah, to close the create table query, so this is the closing bracket. So this is the create query, and now we need to execute that query. So to execute the any query in MySQL database using MySQL connector, we just need to use my cursor. So here my cursor, cursor. So my cursor dot execute command will execute the query. You can write your query inside the bracket too, but since we have created another variables to store that query, and then you can use this query. So with this, this will create the site info table in the QA automation database. And then now since we have created the database, now we need to store some data in that table, so that we can use that table information to do our automation tasks or to do our enable. So to insert the data in the database, let's write another query here, like insert query. So to insert the data in the database, we have the query syntax. We'll have query syntax like below, like this: insert into. So since we have created the site info table, so we'll be using that table. And here we have a two column, site name and then URL. So we'll be writing data in these two columns, site name and URL, and the values will be, we can supply that value using separate placeholder. So we'll have two placeholder here, one is per site name and one is per URL. So percentage yes and percentage yes. So now we need to write the values, what values will be stored on those site name. So for that we can also create another list here. So value, since we are writing multiple values, so we can write them in pair. So the first value will be like Facebook, and then this is the site name, and the URL for Facebook, it will be like this, facebook.com. And then another pair will have like is another row, or another site name will be Yahoo. This is just a concept of how we can store the data in the table, but you can write your own information here, yahoo.com. And similarly, let's add one more record here. The last record will be the Google, and the site name Google. I'm writing the whole site name here because we'll be using Selenium, and for Selenium we need to specify the protocol too. So google.com. So this is the insert query, which will utilize these values to store that information, and this is the closing. Now like we have executed this query, create query, we need to execute the insert query, the my cursor. Since we'll be executing this query for multiple parameters, like we have here 1 2 3 parameters, so for that we need to specify the execute many command here, and then we have an insert query that should be executed here, and then we have a values in these variables. And since this is the execute query, after the execution of this execute query, we need to commit our changes to save it permanently. So to commit the changes, then we need to write mydb.commit. So this will commit the changes, or this will commit the changes we have made through this insert query, and then store that information permanently in the database. And then we can also print how many rows are inserted here. So those rows will be available in my cursor dot row count. This will give us the row count, and we can append some character here. Rows were inserted. Okay. So this completes the database written part. Now we need to read this information from the database to do our operation. For that, let's create another function called readdb, and then again for this db operation we will be using the cursor object here. My cursor, the database information will be similar, the configuration part. So my db dot cursor, and now we need to run the select query here. The query will be very simple, so that's why we can specify query directly into the execute statement. So my cursor dot execute, and the statement will be select strict from the site info. So this is the table we have created in our write db function, so that's why we'll be using the same table. So if you have another table where from where you need to pull the information, then you can replace this with the required table. And then after executing this query, we need to fetch that data. So fetch all command of this cursor object will do that operation. So we can store that into some variable. Let's say my result equals my cursor that fetch all. So this will fetch all the information and then store that into the my result variable. So since we have multiple rows of information in this variable, we can use loop here. So for each row in my result dataset, we have 2 columns here. The first column will contain the data for site name. So this will be row 0, as it will start from 0, and then URL will be in row 1. Okay, now we have a site name and URL information here. We can also print that information, site name and URL. The next task here will be to open this URL one by one, since we have already used the for loop here. So those information will be available one by one. So to open that URL, we will be using the Selenium WebDriver. So let's first initialize the Selenium WebDriver into separate function, and we'll come back to this function. So we can call this as a initialize driver. And since we'll be using the Selenium, so we need to import Selenium WebDriver here. So for that, first you need to install the Selenium package from the here. So you can search for Selenium and see if the Selenium package is already installed in my machine. So if it's not, then you can install, or you can use pip install Selenium command in terminal to install this Selenium package. So from Selenium, we'll be importing the WebDriver. We also need need to pass the Selenium WebDriver as a service object. So for that, we'll be importing selenium.webdriver.chrome and .service import service class. And to dynamically install the Chrome driver during the code execution, we can use WebDriver Manager package. So that will also be available here, WebDriver Manager -manager. It's already installed in my project, but if it's not in your case, then you can install that from pip install or from the package search. From WebDriver Manager .chrome. So if you already download the Chrome driver from Chrome driver site and then use that in the project, you don't need to do that. But this has the advantage of using the installing the Chrome driver manager automatically by reading the version of your Chrome browser. So these are the 3 packages that we'll be using here. So in the initialize driver section, so now first we'll be using the service object, and in service object we'll be using the Chrome driver manager and that install. This will install the Chrome driver and store that into the service object. And now we'll be declaring the driver variable here, and the driver will be WebDriver.chrome, the WebDriver from Chrome. And then we can pass this service that we have installed. And since we'll be using this driver, Chrome driver outside this function, and the scope will be outside the function, so for that we can set this scope as a global, and then global driver. So this will allow us to use the driver, Chrome driver, anywhere we want. Okay, now we have completed the Chrome driver initialization part, and then now we can use that driver here. So driver.get driver.get command will allow us to open the URL in the Chrome that we have installed here or launched here. So driver.get will be opening the URL. So the URL are already stored in these variables that were pulled from the database. Now driver.get URL will open the URL, and to utilize this site name variable, or to confirm whether the required URL are opened or not, we can get the site name from individual URL using the driver.title. So the actual title will be driver.title. This will pull the title name. This will pull the title from the opened web page. And then we can compare this title with the title name that we have specified in the database to ensure whether the all URL are opened properly or not. So to do the assertion or to do the comparison, we'll use the try catch here. In the try block, let's assert the site name in expected site. Sorry, actual site. And if the site name we specified in the database found in this actual title, then we can say the site are opening. So site name, so it will be like Facebook URL open. Successfully. And if we found any like discrepancy or the title do not match, then we can throw the assertion error here. So assertion, if the assertion error occurs, then we can print information like print site name URL couldn't be loaded or something like that. This completes the site opening part. This is actually we have like declare all the required function. Now we need to call them one by one. So first we'll be calling write db function, and then we'll be using the initialize driver. So this will initialize the driver, and then we'll be using read db. So we don't need to run this write db function every time, since once we write all the database, all the table information in the required database, and then we can just call this to function, and this is the write db. This is all. And again, in some cases, like there might be a situation where the table already exists in the database, or something similar. So in such cases, we need to drop those table or database, or mainly table. So again, we can also add that query in the this part. So I have already added that. So my cursor, my db cursor, drop query. So these 3 lines of code were added just a few minutes ago. So here my cursor, my db.cursor, drop query, drop table if exists site info. If this table already present, then we need to drop that, and then we need to execute this query. If you don't add this code, then while executing this query again and again, then it will show the error like site name already exists. So these 3 lines of code. So the cursor it's already required for all this query, and then drop query is here, and then you can write this, or you can copy this query inside this block. Okay, so drop table if exists site info. Okay, so this is all. First let's execute this query, and then I will show it again. uh, okay. Okay, 3 rows were inserted, and it will open all those URL one by one. Facebook, and then Google. Okay, so this is all. You can also maximize the browser using driver.maximize. Okay, I'll quickly recap this. First, we have defined the database configuration here: host, user, password, and database. So this will be the configuration to connect the database. And then first we have we have dropped the database we already have, if we already have. And then the create table, we have created the table and then inserted the data in the table, and printed how many rows were inserted. And then in the readdb part, we have executed the select strict from site info command, and then store that into the my result variable. And using for loop, we can print those URL here and then open those URL one by one. And also we did some assertion to confirm whether all the sites have those site name or not, and then it shows all the URLs were open successfully. I closed the Google browser, so that's why the print statement were not written there. Okay, so I'll show the full code again. Yeah, so yeah, so this is the import part, and then this is the database configuration part, and here we have some typo here, but let's be it. Okay, and then this is the write db, and this is the db read part. Okay, so these were the 3 records inserted in the database, and then we have printed that and returned. Okay, I'll just slowly scroll this. If you also need this code, then you can mail us. Okay, so this concludes the tutorial. If you encounter any issues while running this code, please feel free to reach out to us via comments in this video, or you can send us an email. The address which is available in the channel description. So thank you for watching the tutorial.